Imagine yourself in a country where you're away from all of the books, all of the projects and assignments that are due either this week or next week, away from work, and I want you to imagine yourself in a country on the coast of West Africa. Imagine yourself in a country that consists of a coastal strip in the south, a dense forest in the interior, and savannas in the north. Ivory Coast is definitely this type of country. It is known for its vibrant, colorful, and lively culture. Ivory Coast has a lot to offer, from its tourist-friendly climate to its national parks and sites. Hello, my name is Mannah, and today I am going to give you a general overview of Ivory Coast. Second, I will share with you the unique culture of Ivory Coast and what makes the country so intriguing. Last, I will talk about the unique communication style as well as the family structures that exist in Ivory Coast. I would have to say that most Americans visiting Ivory Coast for the first time would definitely experience a culture shock. As I mentioned before, Ivory Coast is located in West Africa. It was established in 1893 when it became part of the French colony. It gained its independence from France, August of 1960. One of the main productions of Ivory Coast is definitely its coffee and its cocoa. As of now, the 21st century, agriculture is definitely a big part of its market as well. There's a smallholder production of cash crops, and it's very dominant right now. And the country's official name is the Republic of Cote d'Ivoire. The president of Ivory Coast right now is Alassane Ouattara. The official language is French. Of course, they got their independence from France. The population is approximately 16 to 17 million people. The Ivory Coast is an independent republic with a democratic government, and it lies in the Gulf of Guinea and the west region of West Africa. The cool thing about Ivory Coast is that it has two capitals. It has a political capital called the Yamoussoukro, and it has a commercial capital called the Abidjan. In the 1990s, Ivory Coast suffered from political strife, and many tourists were warned not to go to Ivory Coast. But if you're brave enough to take the journey, you'll be amazed by the diverse culture and the way it is shaped by a magnitude of different ethnic groups. As I mentioned, there are over 60 different ethnic groups in Ivory Coast, and with all this diversity, music is definitely a major part of Ivorian culture. Today, Ivorian culture mixes African and European styles. For example, there is a style called Zabuzu. It's like a high-tech synthesized sound with traditional dance rhythms and vocal singing. Reggae is also very popular in Ivory Coast. Music and dance do play an important part in traditional and modern ceremonies. Robert J. Mont wrote in his book, A Historical Dictionary of Ivory Coast, that traditional ancestral worship and ceremonies use carved wooden masks to link with the spirit world. One of the famous, most popular celebrations in Ivory Coast is what's called the Festival of Masks. They celebrate in November, and the dancers wear a mask and play homage to spirits. In Ivory Coast, grains is definitely popular. They eat a lot of rice, a lot of corn. They also eat a lot of chicken. They eat rice and their grains with different stews and soups. One of the national dishes is what's called fufu. That is also eaten with different sorts of spicy stew. They love drinking homemade beer as well as palm wine. And according to the World Factbook, Muslim is definitely the majority of the religion in Ivory Coast. About one third is Christianity. Many of these different ethnic and religious groups have different ways of communicating in Ivory Coast, and of course, the way they communicate is much more different from the way Americans communicate. For example, in Ivory Coast, if you were speaking to a political leader or a manager, you wouldn't talk, you would just listen and let them talk. It shows respect. Also, sometimes men and women will sometimes be seen holding hands with same sex, and it doesn't really mean anything as we would take it in America. It's just the way that they communicate with each other. As far as marriage, they do take marriage very, very important. They don't consider it as a joining of two people, but instead joining of two families. The man normally works while the woman stays at home and takes care of the children and cooks and cleans. And yeah, the man goes to work. In conclusion, if you've ever wanted to visit something that probably wasn't as pretty or as nice, but still had a cultural aspect to it, I would definitely consider going to Ivory Coast. I have given you a general overview of the country. I have explained the geographical location and the country's formation. Second, I told you about the different historical attractions that one would probably see if they were to visit Ivory Coast. And I told you how music and dance and religion play a big part in Ivorians' life. And even though Ivory Coast may not be the first place you think to visit for a vacation, but think about the clothes and the lively culture and the different ethnic groups, and think about a way of opening your mind and broadening yourself to different experiences. And I would definitely recommend visiting Ivory Coast.